Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. We have to fault the Canadian government mightily. A neo-McCarthyite regime in Canada. You can be a great creative artist like Madame Lisitsa, and you're going to be banned for your political opinions? Shame on Canada. All this hypocrisy that they were somehow freer and more able to provide liberty. Baloney. It's not happening. Look at that guy Harper. He's a neocon. Look at Lisitsa. Canadians put an end to this neo-McCarthyism. Right? Get that woman reinstated. She's a great artist. She does not deserve this. Just because she has a soft spot for Donetsk, as do we. And we're going to talk about this in just a minute, because Donetsk is now under unprecedented fascist attack. And we're going to turn to that in just a second. But now the big picture in the world is this financial situation. So, at any rate, in Le Monde on the 31st of May, Tsipras goes through a whole series of things that they've done, concessions that they've made. They've agreed to propose, to prolong, to delay, to temporize. Why the liquidity blockade on the Greek economy? Greece is trying to pay. They have paid more than 17 billion euros in interest and amortization. That's about 10% of GDP since August 2014 without any external funding. Now, what is the demand of the Troika? It seems to be, once again, looting pensions. They're not interested. You can put the screws on the fat cats and the oligarchs. No, that doesn't count. They want to see austerity against the helpless parts of society. Okay. The other thing is labor. They say, we want reforms. And indeed today on this national public radio, they're all prating about reforms. In oligarch speak, reform means you're stripping somebody of their rights. That's what's called reform. So the ability to fire somebody, hire and fire, that's a reform. No, that's not a reform. That's turning the clock back to the Dickensian world of hire and fire, which we have here in the United States. Nobody in his right mind should want this. So what they're saying is the position from Tsipras is the European institutions are demanding a degradation of the Greek labor market, which is below the standards which the European Commission and European Parliament have promulgated for the European labor market. In other words, they're demanding that the Greek government flagrantly violate European labor legislation. All right. And then pensions, we've heard about it. Almost half of all pensioners in Greece receive a pension which places them below the threshold of poverty. And 23% more live in danger of poverty and social exclusion. So, why is there a crisis, says Tsipras? It is due to the insistence of certain institutional actors, Schäuble, Draghi, Juncker, who insist on submitting absurd proposals and displaying a total indifference to the recent democratic choices of the Greek people, despite the fact that they'd said they would have to make some kind of concession. Is it careerism? Is it that somebody like Schäuble has been wrong so much that he can't admit it because that would be the end of him? No, it is a European strategy, he says, that essentially goes for a two-speed Europe. The core, the wealthy part, will set the tough rules regarding austerity with a super finance minister and the European Central Bank with unlimited dictatorial powers, harsh punishment, mandatory austerity, more restriction than the movement of capital, and so forth. Now, the warning, here's the warning. What is not being taken into account here by these Eurogarchs and Eurocrats is the huge risk, the enormous danger involved in the two-speed Europe. The strategy risks the beginning of the end of the European unification project by shifting the Eurozone from a monetary union to an exchange rate zone. It triggers economic and political uncertainty, which is likely to transform the economic and political balances throughout the Western world. We are at a crossroads. We have made concessions. The decision is in the hands of the institutions, even though these are simply front men for the leaders of the various countries. And then finally, will it be Europe of solidarity, equality, and democracy, or rupture and division? If you think it's only about Greece, you're making a mistake. Get out your copy of Ernest Hemingway, For Whom the Bell Tolls. And, of course, that quote goes back to John Donne. Never send to ask for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for you. In other words, you, Schäuble, you, Draghi, your institutions will be shaken and perhaps shattered if you push Greece over the brink. And that is worldwide. As I think I said last week, one of the comments came out of the St. Petersburg meeting of the Likhatchov Scientific Conference is, once somebody leaves, once South Carolina left the Union, others followed. If Greece is going to be pushed out, because that's what it's going to be, Greece does not want to leave. The overwhelming Greek public opinion is they want to stay in it, and with good reason. With normal, rational administration, it's better to be in the European Union than to be outside. Why? Because if you're outside, you will be destroyed by speculation. You will be destroyed by credit default swaps on your national bonds, and your currency will become negative value, and your living standard will collapse, and your poverty will increase. Ask the people in Iceland. They took the advice of Michael Hudson. They didn't take my advice to declare a debt moratorium. And what happened? Their interest, the level of their currency collapsed. And that meant, since everything is imported, that their living standard also steeply declined. So that's For Whom the Bell Tolls. Now, there's even more. In the last couple of hours, we've got Tsipras here. Yesterday we saw Caruso Cabrera on CNBC, and she had two faxes. One was the Greek proposal of the last couple of days, and the other was the Troika, the institutions proposal. And she pointed out, well, there are these two competing things. Tsipras calls upon the European institutions to withdraw their proposal, to take it back. It's clearly unrealistic. It's absurd. It's a bad negotiating trick. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. It's the 5th of June, 2015, here in Washington, D.C. Webster Tarpley reporting. Now, we're paying a lot of attention to Greece and the international finance situation to round out the Greek picture before we go to Athens in the next hour. Tsipras, speaking in the Greek parliament today, has pointed out that the proposals of the creditors are unrealistic. The Greek government cannot consent to unreasonable proposals that call for devastating measures for pensioners and Greek families. I want to believe that this is a bad negotiating trick. It's an unpleasant surprise. We will not succumb to the irrational blackmailing demands of our creditors. So they've told the IMF that the 300 million euros are coming at the end of the month. So the Troika is running the institutions. Tsipras goes on. It's clear that even the markets know that we don't want a big blow-up, so the time is running out for Greece and for everyone. So you're getting signs of capital flight increased. You're getting a lot of pressure on Greek bonds, right? The basis points, the spread, as the Italians always say, lo spread has gone up. Gisselblum, Disselblum must be some kind of toxic weed. If they come up with the Disselblum being the Dutch finance ministers and the chairman of the Euro group, gaggle of finance ministers, if they come up with alternatives on our proposal, it should be financially correct and wise from an economic perspective. What the hell would you know? You're an austerity ghoul. Your policies have failed. They're in ruins. They claim, Olivier Blanchard, IMF chief economist, claims that the IMF, the Euro Commission, and the European Central Bank have made reasonable proposals. Olivier, quelle honte. Be ashamed of yourself. That is not the case. So, what do we have? 74% of Greeks want to stay in the euro, and it would be better. But I think as Tsipras is showing, there are limits. And one of the things is maybe the 300 million euros that they had were needed for pension payments. They don't want to default on pensions, rather default on the IMF than on pensions. If Schäuble is determined to destroy the euro, there's nothing I can do here to save it. And I think that's what some people are concluding. However, now, we're looking for Portugal and the Bloco de Izquierda, the leftist bloc, to come on in. Spain, Podemos is a real force, even if Iglesias is fishy and a rotten apple. We've got all kinds of stuff going on here. Madame Lagarde has told Yellen, keep your rates at zero or else. The OPEC meeting in Vienna has concluded with the idea of maintaining the pump at 30 million barrels a day, right? Driving down the prices. Ultimately, this is good for economies, but bad for finance oligarchs. And again, the main thing is, if there is a chaotic Grexit, Greek exit, if there is any kind of exit, this will be a contagion. This will be a world banking panic. Mark my words. Maybe not 1 week or 1 month, but it will head that way, especially with Cameron of Britain meddling the way he does and threatening the chaotic breakup of the European Union, not even the euro, because he's not in that. And behind it all, Greece is ultimately not alone. They've got perhaps Portugal coming online, Spain coming online. That's already a much better position in the ministerial councils. Ukraine is about to blow. Ukraine will blow. We're told that this woman from Chicago, this foreigner who now has she's now the Ukrainian finance minister, that she has magical powers. No, Ukraine will blow, and they won't cough up the money because they simply can't. Once Ukraine blows, if Greece has blown or been driven out, then you got to look at what are the implications for Venezuela, what are the implications for Argentina, and what are the implications for other countries that have kept it hidden so far, right? As I think Perot said, when the tide goes out, you find out who's swimming naked. That could happen much quicker than otherwise. So, and Ukraine is obviously flailing, right? Ukraine has just named Saakashvili, the classic fascist, to be the governor of Odessa, the scene of the massacre that essentially destroyed the nation of Ukraine, made Ukraine non-viable. It will not be forgotten. And Bloomberg is already trying to tout Saakashvili as a magnet for foreign investment. I think he'll be a magnet for Nuremberg indictments. Now, so we are headed towards the brink. And again, a normal procedure. How did General Motors get saved? They got a write-off about half of their debt. How was Chrysler saved? About half of their debt was written off. It's a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, if you want. With a country, you're not going to do that. That can all be done simply through the haircut mechanism, right? Get out the pinking shears, and you begin to go to work on that bonded debt. Now, shifting. away from economics and now into just the question of Lagarde, right? Why is Lagarde telling Yellen to keep the Federal Reserve interest rates at zero? What she seems to be citing is countries in Southeast Asia which are on the brink, in addition to the ones that I've mentioned. Countries in Southeast Asia that are on the brink, they're teetering, and the idea is if the U.S. interest rates go up, a lot of that Southeast Asian debt is bonded debt in U.S. dollars. Those interest rates will go up when it has to be rolled over. Those might even be euro dollar interest rates. That will then push some of those Southeast Asian countries into some kind of crisis. So Lagarde is trying to safeguard the interests of the finance oligarchy worldwide, giving Yellen orders. And as was said today, that's what the IMF always does. You get upset if the IMF is giving the U.S. orders. Deal with it. That's what they do to every country in the world. Now, whether you follow them or not, that's another story. So, Ukraine. We have just had another attack by the Ukrainian fascist Soldateska, the Kiev forces, attacking places in the Donetsk People's Republic. Now, the areas we're talking about are Telemanova, and related areas. And these places have been bombarded by artillery and we believe Grad rockets coming from the Kiev side. The Kiev spokesman, this guy Lysenko, right? Whether he's he's got a theory of evolution, I don't know. He's not very evolved himself. Lysenko says that the Kiev forces now officially refuse, to pull back tanks and heavy rocket launchers and heavy artillery from the front line. In other words, Kiev today officially said, we are we're against the Minsk II Accord. We're violating it, and we're even telling you that we're violating it because of something the rebels, Donetsk People's Republic, allegedly did. So we'll be talking about this more about segments. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So the fighting on the territory of the Donetsk People's Republic is in the area of Marinka, Maryinka, and Krasnochorivka, outside Donetsk. Now, I'm guessing that these places are in that critical area northwest of Donetsk, close to the Prokofiev International Airport. And it looks to me like this is the following. There was just a conference in Paris about the situation there in Ukraine, eastern Ukraine, at the European Union. And this seems to be the gambit of Poroshenko and Yarosh, his fascist right-hand man. They want to blow this up because obviously the Ukrainian artillery starts firing. They announce that they're not pulling back according to the Minsk. They say, we are officially violating the Minsk II Accord, says Poroshenko and his forces. So bad news. And therefore they start shooting, and then they blame it on Donetsk, right? This by now should be a fairly clear pattern. By the way, we call him Poroshenko because his policies are obscene. So this Poroshenko character and his Soldateska are the guilty parties. They are the aggressors. And now we're left with, the calls are now multiplying that there should be no lifting of the sanctions on Russia, and indeed that they should be increased. Well, the sanctions are obviously a major irritant. However, economically, the effect is not that much, as distinguished Russian educator told me the other week in St. Petersburg, right? The average Russian doesn't feel it. He only knows when he sees articles about it in the newspaper. So we have this soccer scandal going on. If it goes in the direction of questioning whether the World Cup goes to Russia, you'll see that Putin was probably right on that for whatever strategic importance soccer may have. And I guess in today's world it can. The Ukrainians say there are 9,000 Russian troops on their border. Well, that's fairly normal. I've been through that border now 4 times, and I didn't see any Russian tanks. You can't tell. A lot of, people are not identifiable by their uniform, but Russian forces, regular Russian forces, have a Russian uniform, and that you can tell. So, the Financial Times revealed that they have an old oligarch who comes to their offices once a week. Now, once you say old oligarch, we go back to this famous anthology by Francis Godolphin, my old professor at Princeton, who did the Greek historians. And one of the Greek historians is a guy who was thought to be Thucydides, but then not. And he's called the old oligarch. So the Financial Times now has an old oligarch. There's also the interesting question of the Crimean land bridge, right? There was all this brouhaha that Russia was about to seize the entire coast of the Sea of Azov, the entire north coast of the Black Sea, the entire Pontic steppe, the flatlands north of the Baltic, the Black Sea, and get that land bridge to Transnistria. Well, none of that has happened, but nevertheless, the attack goes on, right? And a lot of very ugly propaganda coming out of this. Vitaly Churkin at the United Nations says that Kiev is deliberately trying to punish the population, civilians of the Donetsk People's Republic, because they support the Donetsk People's Republic. In the last couple of broadcasts, I have tried to show you why it makes good sense to support the Donetsk People's Republic. The Kiev regime is a bunch of rotten oligarchs. Kolomoisky in the lead, even though he's, for the moment, he's collecting his coupons from Switzerland or someplace like this. Now you're getting the madman Saakashvili as a governor appointed. It's a government by foreigners. Finance minister's a foreigner, an American woman. Saakashvili is a foreigner. He's a Georgian. So it's the IMF working through a cosmopolitan caste to try to impose those cuts. So remember, the nationalization of the banks, the railroads, the coal, the electricity, the creation of a public sector, including supermarkets and collective farms, if you want it, the 3-child per family encouragement with all kinds of advantages if you're willing to do that. In other words, the policy of President Zakharchenko, back to the state, worked out in detail by Boris Litvinov. This, I think, is it's a real obvious reason to prefer the side of the Donetsk People's Republic. So, of course, the people here in the West either don't know it or they just can't fathom it. So, you put this all together, and it's a big problem.